Okay, are we ready for? Okay, are we ready for? Yep. All right then. Thanks everybody for going through the workshop. You enjoyed that. Some information download. It was fantastic for me. To watch and learn. And now we a selection of the speakers. Stay a little bit longer. Experience as open source, moderated by my good friend Miss Morishe. He's the principal program garage here at Vancouver.
Hi. Well, we've collectively decided to stand for this panel. It'll make sure that we keep short and ending as soon as the beverages are available, which should be very shortly. So very quickly, as Chris introduced me, I'm Stéphane Marcharmat. I'm the principal PM for the garage internship for the garage here in Vancouver, with my main responsibility being the internship program. So two of the projects that were showed today, Web Studio and the last Mark Device Express, were garage interns. So those are people that are mostly that go to University of Canada. And it's the important thing for as we build those code extension that we did it have from day one. So even though we were working at repo, you can see the entire history of the work of what they went through, and hopefully see the quality of their code improving over time. So I'll just jump into it. First question for the panelists is if you can just reintroduce yourselves. If you've talked earlier today, so kind of your name, title, company that you work for, and just a quick refresher as to how you use open source in day activities.
Yeah, my name is and work for Misty West. I'm a scientist and data scientist. Which means I'm from firmware to machine learning, and Aaron doesn't do it Misty West, I guess. With source, I do a lot. So most of these projects are open source to begin with. So I do a source develop a lot of great use of for data science, for machine learning processing, anything you name it. Simulation with OpenForm and DL2.
Hi everyone, I'm Luca, architect at Dallas. We and myself are a master of open source. I'm an open source contributor myself. I'm an OJS emeritus contributor, and I've been working in open source since a long time ago. I cannot still remember. And yeah, open source is part of the day-to-day in terms of the platform that we are building, the tools that I'm using and the team is using, and also my passion. So after work, contributing to open source projects in general.
I'm Srishti. I'm a grad student at Simon Fraser University. As my research, I developed algorithms for processing units, and because of this, in day-to-day life, I use TensorFlow, Python, and all these computer queries, because of which open part of my day-to-day life.
Hey, I'm David with a last name that's just German enough that nobody can pronounce it. It's great because it is an umlaut too, so I never get to book flights without having to go to the counter. Anyway, I've been doing open source JavaScript for 12 years probably. So a large part of my youth went into making a framework work in an Explorer 5 and 6. And right now, still doing open source, not in an Explorer 5 and 6, working with a lot of open source projects and Feather specifically, which came out of my university thesis, to build products on top of it.
Hey, I'm the new person here. My name's Anthony Chu. I am the Microsoft representative on this panel. I just started on the Azure Functions team. It's our serverless functions platform. About a month ago. Before that, I was in developer. And Azure Functions is a fully open source runtime. So you can run it in the cloud, obviously, in Azure, or locally on your machine, or even on an IoT device. and on Kubernetes and stuff like that. So we're very much into open source, and since I've been working at Microsoft, I think I contributed to like so many different repos, I think 6 or 7 different languages. So it's been a lot of fun for somebody like me who just like to try new things. It's just like there's so much stuff going on here that just find something to fix and just fix it.
So maybe keeping the microphone, Anthony, and walking our way back, what would you say are, as you go into contributing to open source, what are good development practices and or sins to avoid as you contribute back?
I think every project kind of works slightly differently. So it's kind of like, to me, the first thing is kind of understand the culture of that project and how they want things to be done. I think most projects kind of want to start conversations as issues versus just like sending in a giant pull request. But for the most part, just really kind of be part of the community and then figure out how to contribute to it.
So to me, the step of making it past, many projects make it easy to start contributing, but getting to the next step of contributing has been something that has become like rather important for the work I've been doing. So I think that's something to look into when contributing, and looking at not just doing the one contribution, but thinking about if you see yourself like doing it again some other time, because there's a big drop from people using it to contributing, but then there's just as big one to people that contribute repeatedly. And yeah, I'd love to hear any thoughts on how that can be improved by projects. But yeah, just a long-term kind of idea of where you want it to go. And you don't have to. It's not a bad thing not to. But projects like need longer-term contributors as well.
In my opinion, along with the development, when you make any contribution, it is important to be mindful of the language you are using during contribution, because you are one single contributor, but there are maintainers who are looking at thousands and thousands of contributions. They even have burnouts, and it is good to be respectful of their job and not just looking at an individualistic side of you.
I think from my side, I think it's always to challenge the whole group in a very respectful way, clearly. But as an active contributor, it's your responsibility also to keep the project growing and introduce to the project your opinion and your point of view. And I've been seeing this pattern going on and on with many projects on any kind of scale, and actually grew thanks to the people putting their own opinion inside and growing it. And probably a nice first-time contributor kind of thing is try to always stay in touch with the contributors and with the people that are contributing to the project. That was kind of the kickstart for a better way of contributing to projects, is to be part of that community and engage directly.
I think for me there are 2 aspects. One of them is a very technical aspect, that if a project has a documented workflow, how they would like to fork, branch, or however use the revision control system or the bug tracking feature, to use that as efficiently as possible within the context of the projects. There are always small deviations on this, so use the tool shell right. It makes things a lot easier for the developers, the maintainers, and for yourself. And then there is the community aspect of this as well, that some of the forums can be the comments are pretty bad sometimes, and this is not helping either side. And everyone can. That's why we have pull requests. So we catch them in the pull request. There is no need for a snide comment in the chat or in the bug report itself.
Okay, thank you. So maybe a question for Lucas, and we'll start and make our way there. Has open source changed the way, so you mentioned you've been using it for a long time, but throughout its evolution, what kind of impact has it had, if any, on how you hire people?
Massive impact. I work in big companies, especially in a company like Thales, where we have thousands of developers. We can see that the best way to hire talent and people that will help the whole organization to grow is, first of all, to look for people that they know how to contribute, because this one has a positive impact to the cultural aspect, and at the same time will bring a new view onto our stack, right? So we are hiring people mostly we try not to have this kind of massive whiteboard interviews, but the first selection goes through, give me your GitHub handle, and we're gonna look at your work. That's the first step. So the impact has been extremely positive, so much that companies that are transforming, thanks to open source, the way they also reinvent themselves across different sub-organizations. If you look inner source, for example, is a way also to help people to move from one side of the organization to another, right? So I think definitely a super positive impact, and we saw it gets harder and harder to hire great talent, but thanks to open source, it becomes easier to level them to the same level set.
Yeah, anybody else?
I think I'll have to pass. I'm not the employer here. I'm a prospective employee. So maybe the employers can actually answer this.
I think from an open source project perspective, I don't just want to be the project that somebody contributes to check off a mark on their resume. It's going back to the point I made before about repeat contributions. So ideally, it shouldn't be a hard requirement people to contribute to open source to be hired. Your interview process should still be better than that, looking at a GitHub profile. But from a workflow perspective, I think it has done a massive amount in how people work. And I keep saying that when I do the introduction to open source at Node School, the process with pull requests, reviews, and all those things is what your company should be doing. Same with continuous integration, tests. All the best practices that you see in projects is what you should do at your work as well. And that makes a huge difference, because then people are already used to your process, and you know that you have a process that has had a lot of experience and has gone through a lot of iterations. So not just from a hiring perspective, also from a project management perspective, I think it was very powerful to change that.
Yeah, so I don't do the hiring here, but I think I'm a little bit torn on this question, because I think there's people who either work in jobs that they can't contribute to open source, or just don't have the time to after hours. So I hope that people aren't just always just looking at GitHub and nothing else. But that said, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for kind of open source, folks at Microsoft, especially the Azure Functions team, who are like, all their engineers are on GitHub. So I kind of knew them through that avenue probably like 3 or 4 years ago. And I probably wouldn't be here otherwise, but at the same time, I think we do have to be mindful that GitHub is not everything.
Mr. West, take on it.
I do think open source has changed mentality somewhat, not only in the job market, but also in university and education in the way how people collaborate. And I think I've hired co-op students and young professionals for the past 10 years, and there was a step change 5-6 years ago where suddenly people could collaborate, suddenly people were contributing and vastly more valuable to the team than they were before. So something has changed in the education system in the university. And you see the emergence of sites like Papers with Code. If you wanted to recode an academic paper 4 years ago, good luck, spend 3 times your PhD time on recoding this one paper. And now you can actually see GitHub code of that. Similarly, if you wanted to do a research collaboration with university, getting 2 university profs to collaborate on an open source project, I had to tell them I'm not funding this project until you 2 collaborate. Either you 2 work together or we're not doing that. And then I had to lock them in a room for a week. So that's how much resistance there used to be there, and that seems to be changing. And you see in the US, like Sunday National Labs, the amount of good quality open source code the US National Labs are turning out is amazing. Canada is still way, way behind on that.
So one more question before we go to the audience, and this one is for Shruti. how have you seen the evolution of open source from you going from undergrad, grad, and postgrad, I believe?
So I wasn't an open source contributor during my undergrad, but I definitely used them. Again, there were a lot of libraries and frameworks to work with. I would say back when I was around me weren't so excited for contributing to open source as compared to using it. But coming back to fast forward today, a lot of people, including my lab mates, are, if not already contributing, are already looking for people who can help them contribute, which I think is a great progress as what I have seen in person.
And thank you. Any questions from the audience? Yes, Chris. Oh, just try to. Oh, where did Chris go? Okay, I'll repeat the question. Yep. So the question is about how can open source be sustainable for people that pour their hearts and soul into it, and people going in and taking their code and finding ways to make money off it.
Yeah, so Feathers does have a couple sponsors, but it's not enough to keep the project running. We've been trying to look at it more from the perspective of making it the secret weapon and getting stuff done quickly, and not putting as much emphasis on monetizing because it's still infrastructure. It's similar with a lot of the low-level HTTP frameworks and things like that. It just, people forget about it. If it works, you shouldn't have to worry about it, right? There's a lot of there's not really an answer, and there's a lot of great ideas out there, from changing the licensing model back to more proprietary stuff for companies that end up reselling or using in those ways. There is sponsorships, and people have been more open or become more open to it, which is really nice to see. But there's still a long way, and the problem with sponsorships always that sponsors can disappear, and it's often just one or two companies that are calling 80% of the revenue. So it's still a risky model to put your full-time livelihood onto any of those projects. The sad part is I don't think there's an answer yet. I would like to see more experimentation with that. On the other hand, it's also a fine balancing act to not compromise the project itself if you try to monetize it, because it sometimes is a big change in culture and expectations too. Sorry, what was the question?
Follow-up question is, should the open source licensing model change?
Yes, I think so, after seeing on how much people are struggling with that. Because it's one thing for Microsoft or Facebook to run an open source project that maybe doesn't make a difference on their bottom line right away, but it's a different thing if somebody is working full-time and then puts another full-time hours into a project that they really care about without any goals on views on how to monetize it in certain ways. I don't have the answer to what. I'm going to pass it on.
Yeah. Well, we'll take another question. I think there were questions.
Thank you. I think open source make the current research and industry R&D everything different from some years ago. So I think there are two kinds of ownership in software. One is the algorithm, so how to make things run, how to make a problem solution. Another one is copyright of the software, the code. So if I have some algorithm idea, and then I want to make my project open, and some so in that case, who has the ownership right? You hear me? Oh, again, you want to?
So I think the question was on who has ownership on when you make contributions.
Yeah. So, for example, I contribute the idea about the algorithm. For example, some signal processing algorithms, innovative. I have some, for example, patented that algorithm. But the algorithm can be coded in Python, Java, C++, many different code. So maybe the open project given to the GitHub hub. So many people can work on that algorithm, have different version of the software. So after that, so the different algorithm, different software is available. In that case, who have the ownership in terms of IP and then copyright?
It is a tricky question. So code itself is protected by copyright as a work of art, which comes with its own challenges depending what license or what copyright you in the end use. Algorithmic protection is fiendishly difficult because the only place who in some extent really does it is the US, and even there not really. And one of the few algorithms which is successfully protected is MP3. But you can protect MP3 because the patent goes down to the bit, right? So the patent describes how bit in a microcontroller are being moved, and that makes it patentable. But you can't patent finite elements. You can't patent matrix multiplication. You can't patent anything which does not even remotely have a physical counterpart. You can patent how your algorithm moves a physical object, an antenna, a robot, or something like this. But the theoretical heart, the theoretical mathematical heart, you cannot protect that way. So you either keep it secret or. Yeah, and that's the decision you make, and that's the decision. Like I think if you look at TensorFlow, Google had and Microsoft had. What benefit do we have from open sourcing a core component of my business or keep it secret? And both Microsoft and Amazon and Google must have come to the conclusion that it's more valuable for them to open it up, to either draw in an ecosystem they could otherwise not draw in, or to flood the market with the technology. It's probably one of the two, or a combination of both.
So I'm also an entrepreneur, and I sold a company that had a proprietary algorithm. So the most complicated part there is that if you look at companies like Amazon, for example, in terms of like the technology and the algorithm of sharding behind DynamoDB, they were smart enough to white paper it, and they said once it is white paper, nobody can apply a patent on top of it, intellectual patent. So they kind of blocked the market, making it open by definition. So that's also something that you see in the market growing more and more and more. You see this incredible growth of like white papers, like a famous Dapper. I don't know how many of you are famous with the Dapper protocol. Is at the core of open tracing. And Zipkin, but it's basically was an extremely smart move to say, well, we make it open so the ownership is global, but we still are recognized as the actual creator, right? So that's when the marketing machine comes in and the recognition.
So you add a defensive publication.
Yeah.
That prevents
the
previous existing body of knowledge.
Yeah, but because unfortunately right now law, especially in the United States and also in Europe, we don't have intellectual property, right? So that's very progressive. But if you look at the intellectual property ownership and patenting of IT-related software and solution, it doesn't exist, right? Because a patent office only recognizes, like you just said, a physical, something that is tangible, and an algorithm is not exactly. Yeah, which is crazy, right? In 2020, when you make billions of dollars on an algorithm that is written in 100 lines of code, right? Yeah. So that's.
Next question. I think there was General.
So as a developer, we all do code reviews and comment on the codes, especially regarding to the contribution guides of the open source projects or our company projects. So did you feel like maybe embarrassed or frustrated when you got criticized? Or if you do a code review, how do you approach to other developers to criticize their code, especially they don't follow the contribution guides? Or is there like a concern for you? Thank you.
Well, I can tell you my 5 seconds. I think it's what I'm telling to everyone as soon as we work together, right? I think 200 and more developers that work in our team. Code reviews and comments done in a respectful way, they're the best way to learn something new. So I always look forward for people to comment on my code, because that's the only way I can move forward, right? Or if you leave and try to continuously grow with your own perception of things, you will never grow. So that's, I mean, on my sense is that I love comments if they're very respectful, right? Sometimes there are people that take it personal, and I always say that if you take technology personal, probably you are working in the wrong field. You should go somewhere else.
From my experience, when I contribute to TensorFlow, I have seen that a lot of people, like you mentioned, are not very well aware about what may be the correct procedure, even though it is very well documented. What ends up happening is, because of being open source, a lot of people start working on the same problem altogether before it is being closed. It's funny sometimes when you look at the issue, one person is writing a code, other is indenting the code, and other person is fixing the spelling errors of the code. I think it was in previous versions when I saw it. But it was funny because it is clearly mentioned how we should do it, but it is, let's give it the benefit of doubt that the other person may not have clearly understood the process, yet had a good intention of contributing it, and so others helping the person go ahead with the contribution.
Maybe 2 more questions? Yeah? Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your today's presentation by Microsoft and all my Anthony, good teacher. Okay. For the trend of 2020, I know that there is only 2 things. One is the security, PCI security, and the Security Council. Also, the other one is the general data protection. For the first one, security, I'd like to know that whether you do something about that security upon the PAM, Privilege Access Management, not the IAM, onto that one. Yeah, Identity Access Management. The second one is any project upon the General Data Protection Regulation. It happened last June 2018. Security.
So is a question about like how is open source, all the different one addressing security and addressing...
Yeah, that's right. Maybe easier to get the PAM, Privilege Access Management, to protect all my client information or identity access management. Like Amazon, right now they have a very good security for the cycle stealing. For the storage, you could not get it easily. Anything in Microsoft, your project.
This is interesting when it comes to security. A lot of open source projects probably have their own processes. I don't think there's too many following like any standardized ones yet. But I think that's something that's going to be changing soon. Like NPM, the no package security assessment too. It's funny because sometimes open source projects start as a proof of concept and then turn into a big, widely used project. What it's doing right now. So I think that's going to be like just making sure that you grow it with the community, right? So that the original goal is still accomplished, and you add features, but also don't add too much, right?
Thanks. I'm gonna push because I get warm before it's drunk. So if there's one more question for the panel.
Yeah, I just want to point out that, when humans are involved, it's messy, right? And that's a good thing. But unfortunately, with our nature in and around code is perfection, right? And finesse. And, when you look at open source, those two things meet, and it's unclear as to what the outcome is. So it's really important to recognize that people are contributing not for monetary benefit necessarily, but for their own fulfillment, right? To do meaningful work. So when people try to superimpose a commercial mindset on top of open source, there's conflict. So it's really important to make that space for people to do that meaningful work without imposing these methodologies or frameworks necessarily, or this perfection-oriented mindset, to let them do that work. Others will ultimately extract value from it in some way, shape, or form, but humans are messy. Let them be messy. Code is perfect, but not always, and make space for those paradoxes. No, there wasn't.
I heard a comment. How many people up there contribute to open source projects because of the love of supporting each other, and how many people do it for their personal benefit?
I was lucky that in my fuel cell life that I could do both at the same time, because I loved building open source software and had two collaborators I could do this with, and was supported by my company. So I was in a pretty lucky position that I could do what I wanted with getting a pretty decent paycheck. So, but this was lucky, and a lot of projects live because people are passionate about this precise topic, and they will never see any innovation for that. But as the speaker before said, there has to be a balance between that you have projects, the passion can drive them forward in a sustainable way, and there will be commercial outlets for this as well, like in my company or in Microsoft or in Google.
I don't want to break anybody's heart, but I find it so difficult. I work with few of the biggest open source contributors in the world, like Matteo Collina, David Mark Clements, James Nell, and I work in a company that was paying me to just do open source architecture or software, and I realized that we don't do it for the passion and for love. We always do it for a very selfish drive, right? It can be a personal achievement, our next step in career, money, or building something that we know how to monetize afterwards, right? So I think the truth is that open source is just a channel, and how you use this channel is completely up to you. The only thing that I saw as a pattern is that you just need to be respectful of not trying to pollute something that somebody is using in another way just for your own interest, or else fork it.
Well, in my case, contribution started more because I wanted to. I don't think I'm in a position right now to commercialize my interests. But if in future I get paid to work in open source, that I think would be ideal for me. And let's see, maybe sometime in future I get to that position.
For me, Feathers came out of some research I've done at university. And when I've finished the paper, the professor was like, yeah, you should patent it. And I was like, no. So, but it was interesting because a lot of the research was like more high level and academic, and it was interesting to Node.js was really early at that point in time, but it did a lot of the things that I wanted it, like needed it to do. So it was just something that I felt needed to exist. And because people are messy, there was also a lot of time that went into making it as easily understandable as possible, which was an interesting process, going from academic research, this is why this makes sense, to showing it and everybody being like, okay, yeah, this I guess, like kind of makes sense. And people still don't agree, but at least you got it to a point where it's approachable and accessible for like many more people outside of academia. And that was a nice process to go through for me. Where it leads to, I still don't know, but I guess I'll find out.
Yeah, I don't have much to add. I guess I haven't even thought about this question about like why I do things. Like obviously now I'm paid to do open source, but before I joined, I'm like, I think it was just cool to be able to contribute to a code base that I have no business contributing to. Like I literally have some if statements running in Azure right now. I don't think I'm qualified to write it, but it's there. So, so that's.
Your comment just now was heartbreaking for me because academia should be driving open source development and access of knowledge, and I found that academia has been standing in the way of it in a significant way, and then you have private companies driving it. And some aspects of it, this is absurd. Yes.
Strikes me as those are great conversation topics over non-alcohol drink and or alcoholized drink. So thank you everyone, and I'll let Chris close off our first summit.
Okay, well, thank you to the panel. Big round of applause for our participants up here. And thank you all to everyone who stuck it out all the way to the end. I know it wasn't just for the booze, it was the sparkling conversation as well, so great. I see this as being a great success. I see that today we contributed across a wide spectrum of topics. I learned a ton, but I was starting from a very low place. So hopefully other people learned some interesting things as well. And I just can't thank you enough for going on this journey with us. I will be sending around a survey to everybody who attended. Give me your. I prefer it to be blunt and honest and authentic, because I would like to improve on these things in the future. But if you liked this and it's something that you would like to see happen again, tell me and we can make that happen. For now, please, you should have gotten drink tickets when you registered. Our bartender is at the back, happy to assist. And if you didn't get one, then please come see me and we can rectify that mistake.